Hey everybody, and welcome back to Gaming for Tokens. I'm Marshall, and in this episode we're going to be talking about GUI stuff. So I'm going to be walking through what all the different GUI or UI objects are, so what you can create to native in Unity to just hook right into the UI system and get moving with a pretty basic and mostly all-encompassing UI for a game. This shouldn't be like anything that you need for a rudimentary options menu or an in-game like UI. Unity's done a pretty good job of providing all the assets you need up front, and then you can swap out the graphics and hook it into your own functionality all you need to. But this video is specifically going to be about kind of how the event system and the input module and the canvas all work together, and then what all of the different UI assets are. I'm hoping this won't run on long. We'll see how it plays out. Alright, so as usual, my basic scene here is just a camera set to solid color and a color, and everything's set to 2D, and that's it. That's all I've done. It's just an empty scene other than that. So to get started, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to UI, and I'm just going to put anything in here. Any of these things, well, not any of these things, like anything from text down to input field, I think even panel and scroll view, should create everything that we need. Basically, you don't want to create a canvas or an event system, but go ahead and click on like text, for example. It's going to create, as I talked about in the last video a little bit, it's going to create the text, it's going to create a canvas with the text parented to it, and it's going to create an event system. These are all things that you don't need the text. You can go ahead and delete that actually. But the canvas and the event system are what you need for a UI to function. Specifically the canvas. You don't necessarily need the event system, but you do need the canvas. What we're going to see here is a big box in our scene. If we uncheck the 2D, we'll see that like our camera is down there, but our canvas is up here. There's some settings on the canvas that you can mess with. So right now we're operating in a screen space overlay, which if I go ahead and recreate that text and I make it white so we can see it better, you'll see that if I move this text to the upper left, it'll be in the upper left of the camera below, and to the lower right, it'll be down there. The problem with this is that if we resize things, it doesn't work very well. So what we have to do then, like if in the game we change the resolution of the game, then all of the UI assets are going to be all over the place. They're never going to be where you expect them to be. So as a result, I tend to not run my canvas in screen space overlay. I usually run it in screen space camera. Oh, something just happened outside. So if you do screen space camera, that means you have to drag a camera into the camera slot. Now what this is going to do is it's going to change the box location, right, for your setup, but you'll notice that it's actually going to create it in front of your camera. Now the plane distance is actually the distance away from the camera that the thing is created at. You'll notice that if you go negative, then it's behind the camera and you don't actually see it anymore, which actually can be a very interesting and useful way to hide your UI, by the way. Typically the way that I end up doing this is I set my camera, what's an easy way to describe this? I usually have my in-game camera, and then I also have my UI camera. They're usually separate cameras, and the UI camera only ever renders the UI stuff, and the in-game camera only ever renders the in-game stuff. So because of that, I can get away with doing some interesting like overlaying, right? Like I can set the UI camera, which I will name to UI cam, and I can actually parent everything to that, like the canvas and all of that's in the event system. And so now I have my UI camera with my canvas attached to it, but I can also set my UI camera to not be perspective. I can set it to be orthographic. And I can set like the far plane to be something reasonable, like 200 or maybe even 100. And then I can set the canvas to have a distance of 50. And now we have this kind of a setup where I have a lot of wiggle room with the depth of my camera, and the canvas is set to be exactly what I need it to be. Also, I know that the UI won't be skewed by any kind of perspective changes if I go depth-wise. To show you what I mean by that, I'll actually change it back to perspective, and I will take my text and I'll move it back. You'll see that it moves left and right on the screen as well, because that's just how perspective works, right? Like, it's here, but now if I move it back, it's more towards the center of the camera. I might want that. It depends on the UI that I'm creating, right? Like, if I want a fancy, like, 3D, like, depth-based UI, right? Like in, it's a bad example, but like, because in Dead Space, it's like an in-environment UI, but sort of like that, but in a UI setting. I can't think of a game that does it like this. I think like a lot of Valve games do it that way now. Like Portal, the new Portal 2 UI, I believe, is like a 3D UI. Anyway, point is, this is how you achieve that. You just make sure your camera is set to the perspective, and then you can move your assets around in like actual 3D space. Which, maybe that's what you want. It's not what I want. Maybe it's what you want. What I'm going to do is instead I'm going to set mine to an orthographic camera, because that guarantees that when I move things forward and back in space, they won't change position on the screen or actually even scale. That gives me a lot more control over what my UI looks like and how to handle UI transitions and that sort of thing. Typically it looks a little bit more like a UI and less like an environment asset. I tend to like that more. I don't know. It's up to you. But yeah, you'll notice that I also parented my canvas and everything to my camera. That way it's easily tucked away and I can disable my UI if I need to. Yeah, and I can save it all as a prefab, which is also important. I can just drag my UI camera into as a prefab and call it good. Okay. So there's also a sorting layer for your canvas. You can put things on various sorting layers, and you can sort your UI in priority order, a custom priority rather. So you can say this UI stuff should render in front of that UI stuff, right? Like your pause menu should probably render over your in-game UI. Typically, I handle all that in code, but you can do it through canvas sorting layers as well if you want to. Yeah, and you can also have, like, there's this is macro, right? This is like big sorting layers, and then you can have micro control, which is the order in that individual layer that it is rendered. And I believe it's lowest to highest. Could be the other way around. Come on, give me a tooltip. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's lowest to highest or not, but I know a lot of the stuff in Unity is lowest to highest. Like if you look at the sorting layers, the layers themselves are like lowest to highest. Sort of. It's like 0 slot, 1 slot, 2 slot. So like if you're 0 slot, you render in front of 1 slot. I believe that's how this should work as well, but who knows? Don't quote me on that. Canvas scaler. So you have how do you want it to scale? Right now, just by setting this to be screen space camera, if I start to rescale this, you'll see that things still aren't behaving properly, right? So if we change this to scale with screen size, you'll see that things are behaving like I would expect them to behave. So they're, we can change the resolution all we want, and it won't move my assets around on screen. The reference resolution that it uses down here is, it's hard to describe, but basically it's effectively just reading an aspect ratio. So it says the resolution the UI layout is designed for. If the screen resolution is larger, the UI will be scaled up, and if it's smaller, the UI will be scaled down. This is done in accordance with the screen match mode. So it more cares about the aspect ratio than it does about anything else. So like if you set this to 16 by 9, that's not 16 by 9. In theory, oh, okay, I guess that does break things. Well, 1080 by, what is it, 1920? Wait, no. Other way around. 1920 by 1080. Right? Yeah. Okay, so then that's actually going to change like the units and stuff, I believe, on the camera. That's why. Yeah, okay. See, that makes sense now. So that actually changes the way that the units are scaled on here. Totally. Okay, cool. That's interesting new information for me. So yeah, that's kind of like the pixels per unit thing in the last video with the sprites and stuff. That's kind of what that is. But there's also a reference pixels per unit as well. So yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is that the differences in these various things are how the screen handles scaling up and down and what it uses as a point of reference to correlate the size of the screen to the units on the canvas and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's kind of complicated, but typically, like, what I would say is set the reference resolution to whatever your desired resolution is, which is what the tooltip says to do. I would say scale with screen size personally, just because that makes it so your stuff doesn't move around. If you set to constant physical size, then you get all sorts of wackadoo stuff. Like if you look down here on the bottom left, there's that. My text is now like way off screen, and if I scale down, it like stays the same size on the screen at all times, but it doesn't actually like stay in the same relative position on the screen. In my opinion, that makes for a really crappy UI experience, because if you have a bunch of stuff everywhere on the screen and then you scale the screen down and everything is huge, that sucks. I can see like individual uses for each one of these things on like if you have a text that you always want to be visible regardless of the screen size, sure, go ahead and use constant physical size. But typically people are going to set to the resolution they want, so that the game, and they expect the game to look the same, bigger resolution and smaller resolution, you know? So you should probably try and get as close to that as possible. That's at least my opinion. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong. Anything is possible. Who knows? Also, the reason why this text is so small is because I set the size to 1920 by 1080, which is 1080p. So yeah, you should increase your what? Oh, because of the actual size of the thing is not big enough. There we go. So yeah, which I will be talking about all the stuff in like all these different UI object types and stuff like that, but ignore that for now. So graphic raycaster is, it's kind of hard to describe. I believe this is what like tells you what you can and can't click on. So it's kind of like a collider, but interpreted at like a 2D level on the canvas. Best way for me to describe it. I have used to build my own UI systems from the ground up in Unity, because this is before the Unity UI canvas system really clicked with me, and before it was really in the position that it is now, and now it's in a good place, I think. Basically, the idea is all of these objects have a box around them, and you can click on them to if you have the graphic raycaster attached. So this ignore reversed graphics is basically like if you set the width to less than like negative, then this is reversed. This is what it thinks of as reversed. So you can't click on things like that. And the blocking objects you can set to 2. I love the way they put this, 2D or 3D if you want. At the moment there's none, so you can click on anything. So like if I clicked on overlapping assets, and it would click on both of them, right? But if I set it to 2D, then all the 2D assets would block all the 2D assets, and then if I set it to 3D, then all of the 3D assets, like assets that are in 2D, would block each other in 3 dimensions, if that makes sense at all. So what I mean by that is like, now these objects block each other in 3 dimensions. These objects block each other in 2 dimensions. So that's a little complicated, but yeah, I believe that's what that does. And then the blocking mask is things that you want to be able to block things. And right now that's everything. So if you wanted like a layer that you could assign things in here that then would not trigger in the raycast detection. So like if you had like a graphical overlay of like fire, or you had a graphical overlay of snow or something, you probably wouldn't want that to block your UI assets. But if you wanted it in your UI, like in the actual canvas, then you could set that to a like don't block UI raycast layer, and then you could set that object to be that, and then you could tell this to ignore that layer. So yeah, that's kind of what all the stuff on the canvas does. The next big complicated thing to talk about is the event system. The event system is, well, it's the event system and the standalone input module. And standalone input module is the more complicated of the two, so it's kind of deceptive. The event system is actually pretty simple. The event system, basically, the few things in here that you need to know, the first selected is basically the first object selected. So if I create a button and I create another button and I move that button, oh, I have some stuff checked that I shouldn't have checked yet. And I'm going to set this back to 2D so we can see what's going on. So yeah, we have our UI here, right? We have our two buttons. Which that button does not need to be parented to that button. So if I have these two buttons here and I load the game up and say that this is a game that's primarily supposed to be used with a controller. So say that this is going to be like an Xbox game or a PS4 game or whatever kind of game you want it to be, or a PC game that is just has controller support even. Which of these two buttons is the first one default selected? Probably like your play button, right? So like you load into the main menu and it's like there's play, there's like a new game, there's an options, there's a credits, there's a quit. You probably want the new game button to be the first one selected. So you take this button and you would put, well, let's make it bigger first off so that we can see what the hell we're doing. And then we're going to say this says new game. Bwop. So we probably want this button to be selected by default. So what we're going to do to our event system here is we're going to drag and drop that to there. That would, in theory, make it so that when we loaded the game up, that button was by default selected. At the moment, it's not going to do much. I don't have a controller hooked up to my PC yet. I've been trying to get the drivers to work for a while now, but it hasn't been happening. I need to resolve that in a heartbeat. Whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on. Oh yeah, there's construction going on outside. Sorry if you guys hear that in the background. Nothing I can do about it. Anyway, so yeah, the first object selected is for the controller. So this is going to be the first button that is highlighted, which right now the highlight color, this is kind of what it looks like, by the way, when something is selected. I can kind of show you. When you hover over it, it changes color ever so slightly. And we can change that by changing it to, say, red. And then when we hover over it, it changes to red. So that's what it would look like in the game, right? It would be red by default. Here, actually, let's see if we can do that. Yeah, so it's red by default. And then when we hover over something else, it becomes not red. Here, hang on. Oh, no, see, that doesn't happen that way. If we click off of it, then it becomes not red. Anyway, that's basically what the first selected does. It selects one of the buttons, and then when you, in theory, hit A on the controller, it would then hit that button. But you don't necessarily need to have something there. It's just kind of weird and clumsy in a game when you load into the main menu and there isn't a button already selected, because you don't know what happens when you hit A, right? Like, it should be easy enough to get into the game. The new game should be selected. That's like a UI UX thing. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on about that too much, but you should always set your first selected object if you have controller support. If you don't have controller support, then it doesn't really matter as much, because you have a cursor, you can just hover over things and click on things. Yeah. So send navigation events, kind of hard to describe, but the idea is there are events on buttons for like on click, and then there's some other ones like there are events that are fired on buttons that happen when you navigate to those buttons and from those buttons, and this is if you want those to happen. By default, it's checked. If you don't really know what it does, I would leave it checked, because you're probably never going to use it, but Unity kind of does. So I don't know. It's up to you. Mess with it at your own discretion. But the idea is that if you don't know what an event is, that's a whole other thing. An event is basically something that happens when something else happens. So when we click on a button, we get an on-click event, which is what this guy is here. But there's also the an on-select event, and there's a on-hover event, and all the sorts of stuff like that. I believe that's what all of these stuff is. So yeah, that happens. So this is like a default. Hey, do you want all of the events to trigger when you navigate over things? If you do, leave it checked. I suggest leaving it checked. If you're just experimenting with stuff, go ahead and uncheck it and then play with it and see what it changes. But yeah, I'm gonna not go into it for this episode because I'm gonna try to get through some more stuff here. The drag threshold, I don't even really know what that does. I assume it is if you have things like a slider, which we should increase the width and height of. Whoa. Maybe we won't increase the height of it. And then we go to our event system, and then we increase this to, well, let's play. And then we increase this to 20. Yeah, that didn't change anything. I'm not sure what this drag threshold does, to be perfectly honest. I've never actually messed with it. I've just always left it at 5. I will look that up in between episodes and get back to you on that guy. Moving on to the standard input module, again, one of the more complicated things. These are the different buttons that you use to navigate the UI. So like I said before, when you have the default button, this guy, selected, what button do you hit to hit OK? Like what's the confirm button, right? That's the submit button. So submit is submit. You can find that in the project settings input. There is a submit button here, which is usually joystick button 0. They also have enter. So if I oh crap, well that doesn't work. Well, either way, it's enter. So if I was playing this game on PC, I could navigate around using there we go, using horizontal and vertical axes, which I believe on PC are set to the mouse. Yeah, like no, mouse X, mouse Y, I believe. And then the submit button would be the submit button, which is joystick 0. Usually it's like that's A on a 360 controller, and then it's apparently it's enter by default in Unity. And then the cancel button is probably B on the Xbox controller, and it's probably like escape and on PC. It's just an assumption. I actually don't know. Submit and then cancel is escape, yeah, or joystick button 1, which I believe is B. So yeah, so these are just the buttons that you use to navigate between things. Input actions per second is how many, like if you hammer the A button, if you just hammer it, you can hit a button 10 times per second. So what that equates to is like every 10th of a second it refreshes the event to be fired again. The repeat delays, if you have a button held down, every half a second it'll hit the button. So yeah. Force module active, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I imagine, I'm not sure what that means. I'll look that one up too and get back to you in the next video on that guy too. So this one and the drag threshold are the two that I'm not entirely sure about. Probably should have done my research before actually, making this video. But all the rest of the stuff is stuff I have already, like, if I don't know what something is, I've never used it before, which usually means that it's not too important. But yeah, either way, I should do my duty and look these things up and get back to you in the next video on that. Yeah. Okay. Now we're 24 minutes in. We can start looking at some of these other things. So I showed you about the button. The button is, it's pretty straightforward. It is a button. You can click on it. It will actually depress. So see it flashing there. I hope you can see it flashing there. I don't know. We'll see after YouTube compression gets a hang of this video. But every time I click, it flashes. We can change it to all sorts of crazy colors. So we set it to like red before. We can the pressed color to this like bluey color. And then what you'll see is when it's by default selected, but if I hover over it, it turns red. If I click it, it turns blue, and if I let go, it turns red. If I click off of it, it turns white. Yeah, so that's the button part of it down here. So you can set all sorts of other things to it. You can set, like, the transition is what happens when you hover on it, click on it, and do all that stuff. So you can actually have it swap sprites. So it'll go between different sprites if you want the button to, like, change shape as it goes between those different states, like selected, clicked, unclicked, things like that. Or you can have it animate if you have various animations to play. I see that a lot with, like, you can do sprite animations, so you can actually have like this is maybe a bad example, but in Mega Man X, how you have that you hit new game and then it shows Mega Man and he shoots the blaster. So you could do something like that with this, where you could actually trigger a sprite animation based off of like when you click on the thing. Typically, I use color tint just because it's easy and it's very straightforward. It's clear messaging, and it's not a lot of work. So to get a basic UI up and functioning with very minimal art stuff, you can just use color tint. It also has a target graphic button, which is usually just the button. So this is just asking for an image. In theory, you could hook your button up so that when you hovered over it, it made a button over here change colors. You could do. I don't know why you'd want to do that. That's really bad UX, but you could do it. It's a thing that can happen. Yeah. The fade duration and the color multiplier are all sorts of things you can mess with. So, wow, that color multiplier is not good. So this color multiplier, I guess... Oh, that's why, because I forget. When you multiply a color, it becomes more white. Because you're multiplying it more by 1. Well, you're not multiplying it more by 1. That doesn't make any sense at all. You are multiplying it by a higher number, and the higher a color goes, the more white it becomes. So, yeah, that's what this does. I wonder if we can set this to like -3. No, I can't. Okay, well... I don't know why you'd ever want to use this when you can just set the colors to be what you want them to be. Anyway, the fade duration is interesting. So if we set this to like 1, and then we click off of it, you'll see that it changes color very slowly. And if we hold it down, it changes color very slowly. Not sure why you'd ever want to use that, but you could. You could also set it to like 0.0001, and then it would be like super quick. It'd be like a snap, which seems more realistic, I guess. The fade of 0.1 is just kind of a nice fade. But you notice that if you click on something, you don't really notice the color change very much. So maybe, I don't know, increase that if you want to. Alright, so the next thing I want to show you, I have to create multiple objects for this. Yeah. So we're going to have multiple buttons here. And I'm not going to change their size, just deal with it. Yeah. We also have this navigation thing down here. If we hit visualize, we'll see kind of... I know this is confusing. We'll see kind of the path that things will take. So to make sense of some of this madness here, you basically have you have 4 directions on your joystick, right? You have up, down, left, right for navigating a UI. You do have diagonals, but this system ignores diagonals for the most part. It's whatever direction you are most pointing the joystick in is the direction that it moves your selection into. So if I hit right on this button, it'll go this way. It'll go off of the right of the button to this button. If I go left, it'll go to the left of this button. Now if I move this button to the top, you'll see that it actually changes the way that this works. So now when I hit up, it'll go this way, but if I hit left, it'll also go that way. And if I move this further to the center, you'll see that it'll only work if I hit up and down on this button. This is the default navigation for automatic. And again, this is all based off of like the inputs that we set on the input module here, right? So like if we hit left and right, then we're going to go left, right, you know, whatever that's going to be. So yeah, this particular setup here, for example, if I hit down, it'll go down. And if I hit up from here, it'll go up. But if I also hit right, it'll go down, because that is also to the right. Now, there is a way to set this to only be vertical, so that I can only hit up and down from here. Or there's a way for me to set it horizontal, so that I can only hit left and right to go out of this button. If I say explicit, then I have to actually specify each individual button to go to. So if I said on down, I want to select button 1, then when I hit down, it'll go up here, which is not good UX. Again, this is basically just a way for you to make sense of your UX. If you want to do it manually, you can, but I find that the automatic works pretty well. It's basically just figuring out what the best path for your buttons is. The only time that you may want an explicit call is if you want them to loop. So for example, if I want this button down here, explicit, if I want it to go back to button 1 on up, back to button 1 on left, but on right and down, I want to go to this one and this one. That way this button will actually loop the cycle back around. And I would do the same thing for button 1, right? I would set this to explicit. I would set on down to be this one. I would set on right to be this one. But then on left, I would want it to be, and up, I would want it to be the other button. That way it would loop back on itself instead of being a closed circuit, right? Like if you have this one selected and you hit down, it goes here, and then if you hit down again, it goes to here. But then if you hit down again, it doesn't go anywhere. I would rather it went back up to the top, right? That's what you expect in a game. At least that's what I expect in a game, is for the UI to never have a dead end, right? That's just a UX thing. You never want your UI to have dead ends. You always want to be able to loop back into things. That includes menus, that includes buttons, that includes a lot of things. It makes for easy usability, right? If you hold the down button, you should cycle your selection of buttons constantly. Anyway, so that's what the navigation thing down here does. That is effectively that's the majority of UI assets. So what I mean by that is I'm going to cycle through a couple of the other UI assets that we have by default in Unity. But most of them are going to be primarily the same as that. So like we have our text, which is just text. It's really, really blurry because of yeah, there we go, because of the resolution on the screen down here. If I increase this, then that becomes more crisp. Anyway, so that's just text. It's very, very simple. You just put text in here and you have all your normal text controls. You actually have more robust text controls than text meshes, which is what I've used in the past on this channel. So go ahead and play it with that. It's all pretty self-explanatory. The next thing we have is images. Images are, again, what we used in the last video. They just have a sprite. You'll notice that actually on buttons, something I wanted to talk about, the buttons actually have an image source. This target graphic is just an image on the object, which is the same thing as what we were doing in the last video. So you can actually drag your own custom sprite in. So say, for example, I wanted a circle button. Let's drag that sprite in, and then we make this 300 by 300, and now I have a circle button. We make the text white to match, and then we increase the font size, and then we have a circle button. Now if I hit play on this, you'll see that it actually will change colors a little bit. It's not very noticeable because there's not much meat to the actual asset. But if we change the highlight to red, and we change the pressed to like a blue again, then you'll actually see it change colors. So it's that easy to get like your own custom sprites and stuff in on buttons. You just drag it in and then you set the size, just like we did in the image, in the sprite video before. Yeah. So that's images, pretty self-explanatory. A raw image is actually just a texture. So you could actually put like, well, yeah, let's use our, yeah. So here's our Gaming for Tokens banner. We will do, a 300 by 300 thing, and we'll tuck this guy down here and or up here on the top. And then we have like a little gaming for tokens banner in the corner if we want to. Anyway, yeah, so a raw image is actually just an image. It's kind of hard to describe. You can use a texture in here if you want to instead of a sprite. So if I wanted my party circle, then we could do that instead. Or we could do the party hex, which aren't sprites. Those are just textures, right? A raw image will take anything, but an image, if you... let's create another image. We'll take a sprite and not a... So like if I wanted to put my circle in here, it wouldn't let me because it doesn't like textures, but it does like sprites. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I really hope that makes some sort of sense. Like here's our texture from a long time ago for the cleaver. Great. So that's the raw image. The next thing we're going to go with is a toggle, because I've already talked about button. Toggle is exactly how it sounds. It is a checkbox. So if we go some more height, some more width. Whoa, I hate it when it does that. You get far enough off of the thing and it like freaks out. It like goes super high. So you have a couple different assets here. You have the background, you have the check mark, and you have the label. So the background you can increase the width and height of, and the check mark you can increase the width and height of, because they're just, again, the check mark is just an image and the background is just an image as well. But the toggle has all the code to hook this stuff up, right? It has the graphic, which is the background image. It has the check mark for the graphic, and it has a group of things that are toggled on and off when you check it. So here, let's do some more stuff here to make this more visible. We'll increase the font size of this so we can see what it says. We'll decrease that. We'll put this there. And then we will create, I don't know, let's create that raw image of the gaming for tokens thing. So now when I hit play, oh well, I actually have to hook things up, don't I? So if I wanted to do toggle group, how do I do a toggle group? Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm not sure how to create a toggle group. I've never actually seen a toggle group before. Huh. I don't know. That's another thing for me to look up, I guess. I'm not sure what a toggle group is. That's weird. But I know that if I wanted to, I could hook up this raw image here, and I could say game object set active, and I could set it to that. Yeah. So then if I hit play, I can toggle it on, and I can toggle it off, but I can't toggle it back on. Yeah. Not sure. Not sure how to set that up in a way that I want to at the moment. I'm not sure what this toggle group thing is. That's another thing I will look up for you guys, I guess. And I'll come back with an update video to this that is like a part 2 of things I didn't know. Alright. So that's a toggle. We have a slider. I kind of talked about the slider a little bit. It's just a thing you can grab and slide. So this would be like the value down here. You'll see is changing when I change this slider over here. It's effectively the exact same as this slider here, and if I grab this, that'll change too over here. The idea behind this is it's usually going to be used as a 0 to 1. You can also use it as a -1 to 1. And then the default value is 0 in the middle, and you can set this as like a volume slider or as a difficulty slider, or whatever you want, something that you want to store a multiplier on. Yeah, you can also go top to bottom with it. You can go top right to or right to left, yeah, top to bottom, whatever you want to do here. This is just the direction in which it reads like the min to the max. So left is the minimum, right is the maximum. Now the min is to the right and the max is to the left, which is weird. So yeah, you can do this however you want to. And again, the parts to it are there's a background, which is the actual like the slider bit. There's the fill area, which is the area that is slid to. You'll notice that like this is slightly darker than this. There's the fill, which is the actual the part that is the graphic for filling, because the fill area is just a rect, so the fill is actually the image for it. Then there's the handle, which is mostly just the circle, but then there's also the image inside of it. So there's you can make. It's weird. Like the handle slide area is the area in which this thing can move, and then the handle itself is the actual like grabby part, the part that you grab and move. Yeah. And then all that stuff is hooked up into these. So like there's the handle, there's the rect fill, there's the rect handle. Like all the stuff is hooked up into this object. So in theory, if you swapped out all the graphics for it and you wanted like a differently shaped thing, you could just go to that thing, change the shape, and then you might have to tweak some other values depending on the shape of the thing in like the rect or in the handle slide area or whatever you want. So yeah, that's a slider. Sliders are complicated. Oh yeah, and then they also have a bunch of values for like what you want to like color tint and all that stuff for like on the button had, but like they have this on value changed thing. All of the UI assets have this like on changed event that you can fire off. That's for the button. That's like when you click the button. For this, it's like when you change the value from what it previously was. I believe on the checkbox, it was whenever you change the value on the checkbox. Yeah. Which I'll be talking about more into how to hook that stuff up in a future video. So that was our slider. We have a scroll bar. A scroll bar is it's like a slider, but it's not like, it's, instead it's more like, it's hard to describe. It's basically just a slider, right? But there is no value. There is no percentage coming out of it. Well, there is a value right there. But a scroll bar has a different connotation to it, right? The slider dictates a value to the player. Like, I am moving this to change a numerical value. The scroll bar is a navigation tool, right? It is like, I'm moving this down to move something else. Typically, you don't see a scroll bar on its own. You see a scroll bar in a scroll view. So a scroll view is something like, how do I change the viewport? There is a way in here. Yeah, here we go. So, in this scroll bar now changes the the orientation of this object that is behind it, which is the content box. And then this one controls the left right of it. So this is kind of like, while it is functionally like from a theoretical code perspective, it is a slider. It does not actually behave as a slider, right? It behaves as a navigation tool, and that's what you're seeing here. Yeah, so a scroll view has a few parts to it. It has a mask, which is something that is new. If we show it, it'll actually show the mask, but the actual UI mask is a sprite that is effectively just a square, and then that is set to whatever the scroll view size is, because it's parented to that. So whatever the size of this this object is whatever is only how much of the object and content we're going to see. So for example, if I put the Gaming for Tokens banner in content, oh right, sorry, I have to actually create a image and then put the Gaming for Tokens banner in it. There we go. And then I'm going to put that under content, and then I'm going to move that down to here, you'll see that we don't actually see anything except for what we have in here. And actually I'm going to change this to 16 by 9, and then I'm going to increase the scale of it. Well, no, I'll change it to 160 by 90. Yeah, 160 by 90. Alright, so now when I hit play, you'll actually see that when I scroll this down and over, you'll actually see the little Gaming for Tokens banner. Yeah. So that kind of... hopefully that makes sense to you, like what that's doing. It's hard to describe, but basically, yeah, you just make this content window bigger, and you can put whatever you want to inside of this content window, and then you can use that to scroll around in. It's hard to explain how to mess with this to make it so it's only vertical or only horizontal, but effectively the way that I've found to do it that's the easiest is to just make sure that you set the width of this to the exact width of the thing, and then you'll see only one slider. That's if the thing is set to auto hide and expand. There's also auto hide and permanent. I'm not sure what permanent does. I think that just means that it's always going to be visible at all times. But the so like if we wanted the horizontal one to be auto hid, and then we wanted the content for some reason to bleed out. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. Permanent? What does permanent do? I believe it's just going to mean it's always there. This is kind of what I mean. Like, it's hard to know if I want... I guess the thing with the Unity UI system now is that it makes it very hard to fail, which is good, right? It makes it very, very difficult for you to screw up your UI. So if I actually have this content window wider than the space, then it will not let me not have a scroll just go over there. It's kind of limiting because I can't screw up on purpose, but I can always take my image and bleed it off the edge, and that should work fine. It should not give me the scroll. Yeah, so it won't give me the scroller on the bottom. So I can still kind of screw it up, but I have to try, which is what you want, I think, in a UI system. There's also an elastic, there's unrestricted, and there's clamped. So if it's clamped, then I don't know what exactly these mean. I like Oh, I know what that means. So you can use your scroll wheel, and on a touch device, you can actually like swipe. I've done that before with these. If you do that, then there's like that. If you've ever done it, everybody's done it on their phone where they like try to pull down as far as they can and they let go and then it like snaps back. That's what elastic does. Clamped means that it won't let you do that. Unrestricted means that you can just keep on going. So if I scroll this down, I can continue to scroll down even though I shouldn't be able to. That's what unrestricted means. Elastic feels nice, but clamped is I mean, it's really personal preference. I would prefer clamped personally. That's just me though. Also, these are the toggles for horizontal or vertical. So if you don't want the horizontal, but you want the... So I knew it was somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong. Yeah, I'm wrong. Anyway. Yeah, so a scroll view is probably one of the more complicated things, but, I mean, they're cool and they're useful. I'm using one in a game that I'm making. I mean... You can use them, and again, all the parts of it are hooked up in here. So if you want to change something, then you know, like if you wanted to change the way that the background looked, then you could look at the viewport, right? And then you could change this UI mask to be something like our stretch test. Wait, no, that's not what you want. You want Where is it? Give me the thing. Oh, I think it's this. Yeah, this is the background. So if you want that to be stretch test, then you can make that stretch test if you want to. So, yeah, there are ways to change the way that things look on all the UI assets, and you just have to find out where it is. So like the background for this is the background for that, which makes sense. Great. The next thing is a drop-down, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's what you expect it to be. You click on this and it gives you different options. I apologize for this all being way too small. I'm actually going to change my canvas size again to 800 by 600. That way you can see what the hell's going on. It helps. So yeah, this is just a series of options. You click on it, changes. The options on the drop-down menu are all set up here. So like if I wanted a option 5, because I can't count and I also can't stick to conventions. So yeah, then my option 5 shows up there and I can do that. So that's our drop-down. The drop-downs are pretty self-explanatory. Again, just all the different things are in here. There's a template. The template is what you are going to want to use to change the way things look. Oh, well, the template is yeah. Effectively, it's the drop-down, right? With the scroller built in and everything like that. The arrow and the label are all changeable. You can change all of this stuff. The drop-down has, again, a drop-down image that you can use. It has the UI sprite here, so you can change this to be this wackadoo image if you really wanted to. And then you click on this, and then you open this up, and it doesn't have any of the same consistency. Also, you'll notice that the navigation up here in the top actually is auto-built for you, so you can, with a controller, in theory, go up and down and left and right and all that stuff. Yeah, so drop down. Sorry if I'm going kind of quick, but I'm trying to get through this video before it hits an hour, and it's already at 50 minutes, so we'll see if that works. Input field. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Click on this, you type some stuff, and it comes out there. You can actually get the value of that, which is kind of handy. So you can use this for like input player name and yeah, I don't know what else you'd use it for, or like naming stuff, right? You'd use it for naming stuff or inputting values for things. I believe you can't limit content type, multi-line, new line, standard. So you actually can set it to be certain things. So like you can set it to be a password, for example. And what a password is going to do is it's going to say, it's going to say enter text, and then you're going to say password, and it's going to block it all out as asterisks instead. But you can still get the text from it. So I just typed password. So yeah, you can set the type of content that it is. A name, for example, I believe it will just automatically capitalize it for you. We'll probably capitalize every word in the line. Let's try it. Let's see. So I'm not gonna hold shift for any of this. This is name. It looks like I can't even hit. For some reason that's happening, and it's really annoying. So maybe I can't even put spaces in. Huh. That's really obnoxious. I don't know if that's just Unity being annoying or if I can't actually put spaces in for this, but you should be able to put spaces in for it. So if I say this is name, and then I change this to name, and we hit play, and then we hit 1. Okay, it doesn't automatically capitalize stuff, but I think it tries to. I believe it did when I started the line. I'm not sure. Unity's being kind of annoying right now, and every time I hit space, it opens up this thing, which is really obnoxious. I'm not sure how to fix that. So yeah, you can put a bunch of stuff in here. You can put a pin in. I believe a pin is just going to be like 4 numbers. I don't think you can put text in. Oh no, it's like a password, but only for numbers. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Anyway, input fields. They're really cool, and you can do a lot of stuff with them. Next thing is a panel. Panel's pretty straightforward. It's actually the most basic of all the things, and probably what I should have started with. The interesting thing with a panel is that it works assuming that you want it to be full screen. So a panel is like, think about it like an organizer kind of. It's kind of like the canvas, but it's an image. It's just a background image, right? So you'd probably want this to be like 10 on the Z, so that way it's, behind everything, or maybe even like 50 on the Z, so it's behind everything. And you use this as kind of like a bucket to put stuff in. So you say from the right side, over to here, you would like fill this with text or something like that. You would right click on this, you would put a text object inside of this. You would say that the width is a little less than and the height is a little, whoa, hey. You would say that the height is a little less than, and then you change like the color to white, and then you can say, hey, I'm doing all the text. And it's basically just like a thing for you to visually organize, because without that, it would look like this. And that looks like crap in my opinion. But this looks much better. So you have the, it gives you the advantage of visually organizing the data that you're putting on the screen. That's kind of what a panel does. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. But a panel is really, really that's everything to it. There's like, if you looked at the actual object, it's just an image. It's effectively the exact same thing as an image, except it behaves differently with its rect transform, right? It assumes that it's going to be full screen, so you can use it to be full screen and then shrink it down from there. Great. I think that might be everything, because I already went over the scroll view. You can create your own canvases and event systems. I think you can put canvases inside of canvases, but I don't know why you'd ever want to do that. They kind of don't like being set up that way. I think I've done it once, and I don't think it went well. But typically, you can actually create more than one canvas. You could have another canvas set up on like an in-game camera, and then you could have your in-game UI, and then your like pause menu and options UI. You can have them all set up as separate canvases, and they all like will arrange themselves however you want. That's how you set up these the sorting orders, right? And the let's see here, UI cam, bop, and then you set the sorting layer on it, right? That way you can have multiple canvases, so you can say like, this is my options menu, and this is my in-game UI. So you have all these different canvases doing different things and sorting differently to do what you need to do. That way you can visually organize your stuff as you need, and also systemically organize your things as you need, because then you can take your in-game UI and just disable the whole thing, or you can take your entire options menu and disable the whole thing, and then it all runs off of, I believe, one event system, I think. Yeah, don't quote me on that. Yeah, anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I just went over a lot of information at once, and I did remember that I have some things to explain to you guys, like what the drag, basically what the stuff on here is, or in here is what the drag threshold and what the force module active are. So next video I will open up by talking about that stuff, but for the time being, hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.